We're talking about sanctions so huge, they involve the biggest political players on earth to massive Russian oil giants, and they've already sent crude prices skyrocketing by over 5%. What happened? President Trump just dropped the hammer on Russia's energy backbone. This move instantly rocked China, put India on edge, and signals a massive U-turn in US foreign policy. This is the real oil war. For the first time since returning to office, the US imposed direct financial sanctions on Russia's energy sector. The targets? Rosneft and Lukoil. These aren't just minor companies. Together, they account for over 5% of global oil output and export a whopping 70% of Russia's overseas crude oil sales. Why the drastic action? U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent stated clearly that Washington is targeting Russia's ability to fund its war machine in Ukraine. These sanctions freeze the company's assets in the U.S. and ban any American entity from doing business with them. The U.S. hopes this move will pressure President Putin to finally agree to a ceasefire. This policy shift came right after Trump abruptly cancelled his planned summit with Putin in Budapest, complaining that his good conversations with the Russian president never seemed to go anywhere. The sanctions hit the global market instantly, but the biggest shockwaves landed thousands of miles away, in Russia's two most critical export markets, China and India. First, China's state-owned oil majors went into immediate lockdown. Giants like PetroChina, Sinopec, CNOOC, and Zhenhua Oil have suspended seaborne imports of Russian crude. This move is huge, marking a significant shift for one of Russia's largest export destinations. Even Sinopec's massive trading arm, Unipec, stopped buying Russian oil after the UK had previously sanctioned the companies. Now, China still imports about 9 lakh barrels per day of Russian crude via pipelines, and traders believe those long-term government agreements are safe for now. But the halt on sea shipments threatens Moscow's vital oil revenues. Next up, India. India is the biggest buyer of Russian oil transported by sea. But now, Indian refiners are poised to sharply curtail those imports to make sure they stay compliant with US rules. Here's the scariest part for Asian buyers: secondary sanctions. The US Treasury explicitly warned that any foreign financial institution involved in transactions with sanctioned Russian firms risks being hit by these secondary sanctions if they have exposure to the US financial system. This is the real game changer. It makes players in China and India extremely reluctant to buy Russian oil, even if they aren't the primary targets. Meanwhile, President Putin has remained defiant. He called the US measures an unfriendly act, insisting they won't significantly harm the Russian economy. On the other side of the Atlantic, the pressure is mounting. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky welcomed the US sanctions as very important, and the European Union formally adopted its 19th package of sanctions, which includes a ban on Russian liquefied natural gas imports. The EU is even targeting entities in China, including 2 Chinese refiners and a PetroChina trading subsidiary, for dealing with Russian crude exports. So, what does this mean for your wallet? Global oil prices spiked immediately, with benchmarks like Brent crude rising nearly 4%. The concern is that if Russia can't find buyers, global supply will tighten dramatically. However, some analysts believe the market may pause, reflecting profit-taking and a wait-and-watch stance until the full geopolitical impact is clear. Russia might have to heavily discount its oil further to find new takers. The targeting of Rosneft and Lukoil is a powerful signal of intent by the US to squeeze Russia's finances. But as long as there are players willing to risk beating the sanctions, some oil will still flow. The immediate global response from Chinese majors and Indian refiners proves the US threat of secondary sanctions is very real.